On her final flight, Amelia Earhart radioed a message no one could explain. She was calm, controlled, and then suddenly, gone. No wreckage, no parachute, no trace. For decades, investigators have searched the Pacific for an answer. But every time a clue appears, it disappears just as quickly. Did she run out of fuel? Did she crash on a secret island? Or was Amelia Earhart captured, silenced, because of what she knew? Tonight, we follow her final moments, and uncover the theories that were never meant to be heard. Amelia Earhart was more than a pilot. She was a symbol. A promise that the impossible could be reached if you dared to rise above the clouds. But in the summer of 1937, the same sky that made her a legend would become the place where she vanished forever. Before her disappearance, Amelia had already rewritten history. She was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic, the first to shatter records that even the most experienced male aviators feared attempting. And she did it with a calm, fearless determination that made the world believe she was unstoppable. But behind the confident smile that newspapers loved to print, there was something else. A quiet pressure building around her. Her next mission would be the most dangerous of her career, to become the first woman to fly around the entire world. It was a journey of more than 29,000 miles, crossing oceans, storms, and long stretches of sky where a single mistake meant certain death. Experts warned her that the aircraft, a Lockheed Electra 10E, had limits. The Pacific, especially, was unforgiving. Navigation errors, sudden storms, radio failures. Even in perfect conditions, the margin for survival was razor thin. Still, Amelia pressed forward. Her husband, George Putnam, wrote that she seemed restless, focused, and unable to think about anything except the flight. Some historians believe Amelia sensed something, not fear, but a feeling that this journey would define her legacy. In late June, she and navigator Fred Noonan flew from New Guinea toward their next and most critical destination, Howland Island, a tiny piece of land barely visible in the endless Pacific. Missing it by even a few miles meant fuel exhaustion and death at sea. From the moment they took off, small problems began stacking up. Radio operators reported strange static on Amelia's transmissions. Her signals drifted in strength, sometimes sharp and clear, other times fading into the noise of the Pacific. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca, stationed near Howland, waited anxiously to guide her in. But no matter how hard the operators tried, something was wrong. Her voice was there, but faint, uncertain, as though the sky itself was swallowing her words. "We must be on you but cannot see you, fuel is running low." It was one of the last clear messages Amelia Earhart ever sent. No one on the Itasca could see her. No one could hear her clearly. No one could guide her out of the void. As the minutes passed, her radio signals grew weaker, each transmission more desperate than the last. Reports say her final voice sounded strained, frantic, as if she knew the world beneath her was slipping away. And then, silence. A silence that has lasted more than 80 years. In this chapter, Amelia's story shifts from a tale of adventure to one of the greatest unsolved disappearances in American history. Every clue we have begins here, with a woman alone in the sky, calling out to a world that could no longer hear her. As Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan crossed the vast Pacific, the world below them was nothing but open water, thousands of miles of shifting waves, storms, and silence. Their destination, Howland Island, was barely large enough to land a plane. Just 2 miles long, flat, nearly invisible from the air. To find it, they needed flawless navigation, clear radio contact, and a sky without interference. They had none of those things. From the moment Amelia lifted off from Lae, New Guinea, radio operators noticed something disturbing. Her transmissions were drifting off frequency. Her direction finder wasn't locking properly, and Noonan's navigation tables were already outdated. They were heading into one of the most remote regions on Earth, with no modern GPS, no radar, and only a few unreliable radio channels to rely on. As sunrise broke over the Pacific, Amelia's voice crackled through the radios on the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca. At first, her tone was steady, focused, determined. But soon, something changed. Static flooded the frequency. Her words began to break apart, as if torn by the atmosphere itself. "Cloudy weather, drifting," she reported. Fred Noonan attempted to correct their course, but without strong signals to triangulate their position, they were effectively navigating blind. By mid-morning, Amelia sent a chilling update. We must be near you, but we cannot see you." The crew of the Itasca scanned the horizon desperately. They had prepared smoke plumes, searchlights, mirrors, anything to guide the plane in. But the sky was empty. No sound, no shadow, no silver Electra approaching from the blue. The radio room grew tense. Static thickened. Her words now came through in fragments. "Fuel is running low. Altitude 1,000 feet. We are circling, trying to locate you." To the operators of the Itasca, time stretched painfully slow. Every second mattered. Every missed message could be the difference between life and death. Then came her last clearly understood transmission. "We are on the line 157 to 337. We'll repeat this message. We are running north and south." For aviation experts, those numbers were catastrophic. It meant Amelia was following a line of position, a direction, but not an actual location. If she was off by even a few miles, Howland Island would slip past beneath her, hidden beneath the endless waves. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. Operators called her name again and again. "Heck, Amelia, do you hear us? Please acknowledge." Nothing. The static began to sharpen into a cold, empty hiss. Some operators later said they felt an eerie weight in the room, as if the silence itself was trying to send a message. Fuel projections showed the Electra had likely reached its limit. Once the tanks ran dry, the aircraft would glide only for a short time, before descending into the ocean. Somewhere, in that vast and merciless blue, Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan disappeared. Not a single piece of confirmed wreckage was found. No parachute, no life raft, no oil slick. It was as if the Pacific had simply opened its arms and swallowed them whole. The U.S. Navy launched one of the most expensive and widespread searches in history. Ships scanned the water for weeks. Aircraft flew thousands of miles. But the sky and sea remained silent. No distress beacon, no emergency signals, no survivors. Just a void where one of America's greatest icons had vanished. This moment, this final transmission, marks the turning point of the mystery. From here, the theories begin. The contradictions multiply. And the truth becomes far more complicated than anyone expected. For decades, the official explanation was simple. Amelia Earhart ran out of fuel and vanished into the ocean. But the deeper investigators looked, the more impossible that explanation became. Because almost immediately after her disappearance, strange reports began to surface, reports the U.S. government dismissed, and sometimes actively suppressed. Theory 1. The Marshall Islands landing. Just days after the disappearance, residents of the Marshall Islands claimed they saw a plane, a silver aircraft with 2 engines, flying unusually low over the water. Some said it crashed near Millie Atoll, a place far from Howland Island, but exactly along a route Earhart may have drifted onto if her navigation went off course. According to local testimonies collected years later, 2 Americans, 1 male, 1 female, were seen alive after being taken from the wreckage by Japanese forces. Villagers recalled. They were not Japanese. The woman had short hair. The man seemed injured. If those statements are true, Earhart did not die in the ocean. She survived the crash. But surviving was only the beginning. Theory 2. Captured by the Japanese military. In 1937, the Pacific was a tense battlefield of hidden intelligence operations. Japan controlled vast territories, including the Marshall Islands and Saipan. If Earhart's plane had entered these territories, even accidentally, she would have been captured. One of the most shocking pieces of alleged evidence appeared in 1944, when U.S. Marines claimed they found Earhart's documents and personal items inside a Japanese prison on Saipan. Several Marines later stated, "We were told to stay quiet. We were told the information was classified." Even more disturbing, multiple Saipan residents said a woman pilot, an American, was imprisoned there around the same time. Some described her as tall, thin, hair cut short. She looked frightened. Was this Amelia? There is no confirmed proof, but too many witnesses, from Pacific Islanders, to American Marines, to missionaries, told similar stories. Stories the U.S. government never officially acknowledged. Theory 3. The mysterious photograph. In 2017, a rediscovered photograph from the National Archives went viral. It shows a woman with short hair and a man resembling Noonan, standing at a dock in the Marshall Islands, years after Earhart disappeared. Some experts swear it's her. Others dismiss it as coincidence. What matters is this: someone believed the photo was important enough to bury in a mislabeled government file. Theory 4. Spy mission for the U.S. government. A darker theory suggests Earhart's flight wasn't just a world record attempt, it was a camouflaged intelligence mission. The Electra was heavily modified. Extra radio equipment, extra fuel tanks, a flight path eerily close to Japanese military outposts. Some historians argue the mission's true purpose was to photograph Japanese installations during the pre-war tension of the 1930s. If this theory is true, and her plane went down inside Japanese territory, the United States could not admit what she was doing, because revealing it would have sparked an international crisis. That would explain why so many documents from the era remain classified or missing. Theory 5. The U.S. government knew, but stayed silent. Perhaps the most unsettling theory of all is that Washington eventually learned exactly what happened to Earhart, but chose to keep the truth hidden. Some claim the government did not want to admit that America's greatest female icon was taken prisoner and died in captivity. Others believe that after World War II, political negotiations with Japan required that both nations move on and quietly bury the story. There is even a theory that Earhart, rescued after the war, returned to the United States under a new identity to live out her life in secrecy. Most historians reject that one, but the fact that it exists at all shows how deeply the public doubts the official story. For now, all we know is this: Amelia Earhart didn't simply vanish. She left behind too many unanswered questions, too many sightings, too many testimonies, too many documents hidden in places they shouldn't be. Her disappearance is not just an accident, it is a puzzle with missing pieces, pieces that someone, somewhere, never wanted us to find. And in the next chapter, we explore the only physical evidence ever found: tar, bone fragments, radio logs, sonar scans, clues that might finally reveal where Amelia Earhart's final resting place truly is. For nearly half a century, Amelia Earhart's disappearance remained a ghost story, a legend whispered across the Pacific. But in the late 20th century, something changed. Researchers began uncovering physical clues, fragments, signals, objects buried in sand and coral that didn't belong there. And suddenly, the world had a new question. Did Amelia Earhart actually crash on a remote island and survive long enough to leave evidence behind? The Nikumaro theory. One of the most compelling modern investigations points to a tiny, uninhabited island in the Phoenix Islands, Nikumaro. When researchers first examined the island's archives and logs, they found something startling. In 1940, a British expedition on Nikumaro discovered a human skeleton, a woman's shoe, a sextant box, and several items that seemed out of place for a deserted island. At the time, officials classified it as unlikely to be Earhart. The bones were later lost. But when modern forensic scientists re-examined the measurements recorded in 1940, they concluded the skeleton most closely matched a woman of Amelia Earhart's height and build, far more than it matched any male. This revelation reignited global interest, because for the first time, the evidence suggested she survived the crash. Photographs from the 1930s even show an object on Nikumaro's shoreline, a long, metallic shape halfway submerged in the surf. Some aviation experts believe it may be the landing gear of Amelia's Electra. Was she there? Was she alive? The island's harsh conditions, extreme heat, little water, constant storms, paint a grim picture. Surviving there would have been incredibly difficult. But not impossible. The tar and aluminum fragments. Later expeditions found fragments of aircraft-grade aluminum, pieces of plexiglass matching Electra windows, and even cosmetics jars from the 1930s, often linked to female pilots of the era. One jar, in particular, contained traces of freckle cream, a product Amelia Earhart was known to use. These weren't just artifacts. They were footprints, hints of a final struggle for survival. Radio signals from the void. Another piece of modern evidence comes from radio logs. In the days after Earhart vanished, stations around the Pacific reported faint distress calls, signals believed to come from her Electra, but ignored at the time because a plane underwater could not broadcast. Modern research shows that a partially beached Electra could transmit for days, until rising tides finally destroyed it. Were those calls Amelia's final attempt to reach the world? We will never know for certain. But the logs exist, and they align with the Nikumaroro timeline. The ocean search, sonar and deep dive scans. In the 2010s, underwater exploration teams began scanning the ocean floor near Nikumaroro. At depths of more than 5,000 meters, sonar detected shapes resembling an aircraft fuselage, broken into pieces, resting along a steep underwater cliff. Some scans showed angular metallic reflections nearly identical to a Lockheed Electra. Other teams searched areas near Howland Island, and found debris fields still unidentifiable, but consistent with a high-speed ocean impact. Even with all this technology, the sea keeps its secrets well. But each scan, each dive, each fragment, brings us closer to answering the question the world has carried for generations. The final possibility. Whether Amelia Earhart died in the ocean, survived on a deserted island, or lived long enough to send distress calls from the shore, the evidence points to a truth more complex than the official story ever admitted. She did not simply vanish. She fought. She survived. She left behind signs that the ocean, the islands, and time have tried to erase. And now, after decades of silence, every new discovery brings us one step closer to revealing what truly happened to Amelia Earhart. In the final chapter, we confront the last unanswered question: why has this truth remained hidden, and who benefits from the mystery staying unsolved? More than 80 years have passed since Amelia Earhart took her final flight into the Pacific sky, and yet, the world is no closer to a definitive answer than it was on that July morning in 1937. But maybe that's the point. Because the deeper investigators dig, the more one thing becomes clear. Someone wanted this mystery to remain a mystery. Some evidence suggests Amelia ran out of fuel and slipped beneath the waves. Other evidence implies she survived the crash, made it to a remote island, and fought to stay alive until the sea claimed her. And then there are the darker trails, the testimonies from Saipan, the confiscated documents, the misfiled photograph, the witnesses told to stay silent, and the government files that remain sealed even today. Files from a case the world was told was simply an unfortunate aviation accident. Nothing about this disappearance was simple. Not her final radio calls, not the eyewitness reports, not the fragments found on Nikumaroro, and not the political tension surrounding the Pacific on the eve of World War II. Too many questions, too many coincidences, too many silences. But behind all the theories, all the documents, all the fragments scattered across the Pacific, is the story of a woman. A woman who refused to accept limits, who challenged a world that said she couldn't, who lifted herself above the clouds and inspired millions to follow her. Amelia Earhart's final moments may be lost, but her legacy is not. Her disappearance is more than a mystery. It is a reminder of how far a human being can push into the unknown, and how the unknown sometimes pushes back. So what truly happened? Did she fall from the sky? Did she survive on a deserted island? Was she captured, silenced, forgotten by design? Or is the truth still out there, waiting beneath the waves, waiting inside a locked archive, waiting for someone to ask the right question? The world may never agree on one answer, but the search continues. Because mysteries like this don't fade with time. They grow deeper, darker, more compelling. And so we ask, what really happened to Amelia Earhart, and why has the truth remained buried for so long?